10. There stands Antarctic explorer Ernest Shackleton in front of the American Geographical Society. A special meeting of the society was held to welcome and honor Shackleton with the Cullum Geographical Medal. Society President Mr. Huntington made a few remarks and ended with, "Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Sir Ernest Shackleton, whose home is in England in the hearts of all Americans." Now could I have everyone raise your hand if you've ever held any sort of leadership position before? Okay, put your hands down. Now raise your hand if that leadership position almost cost you your life. I didn't think so. For Ernest Shackleton, that was the case. The information regarding Ernest Shackleton is proven to be accurate due to personal journal entries of his treks, along with information from friends and family. And his exploits were followed very closely by not just him and family, but by historians and other geographers as well. Ernest Shackleton was an explorer who devoted his expeditions to Antarctica, the only unexplored continent at the time. First, I'd like to briefly talk about Shackleton's early years. According to Scottish geographer and writer Robert Mill in his book, The Life of Sir Ernest Shackleton, Shackleton was born on February 15, 1874 in Kilkea, Ireland. After his father tried to enter the army but failed due to a sickness, they were forced to move out to the country. So instead of pursuing his dream as an armyman, he went to the countryside and farmed. So obviously, him farming, Shackleton's biggest hobbies were gardening with his mom and being in the field with his dad. Later, according to Britannica, later his dad decided to study medicine, so they moved everyone to the city into London, and Shackleton ended up going to a preparatory school in Dulwich, and later in 1887 he went back to school and graduated from Dulwich College. And Britannica states that Shackleton entered the Mercantile Marine Service in 1890 and became a sub-lieutenant in the Royal Naval Reserve in 1901. Shackleton went on a handful of expeditions throughout his career, but one that does not get nearly talked about enough is the Nimrod expedition of 1907 to 1909. Even though his biggest dream and the main purpose of this mission was to be the first person to reach the South Pole, unfortunately that dream was crushed by another explorer earlier. And even though they did not accomplish that, Shackleton and his crew accomplished many other historical feats along the trip. Again, according to Mill, Ernest Shackleton and his crew received a send-off on New Year's Day in 1908. The ship was very crowded for the journey at the start of the journey. Not only did he have Shackleton's crew, but the Nimrod also had its crew and the landing party as well. So adding that to the treacherous water, it made the start of the journey really unbearable. After 4 days at sea, they finally made it to the other side of New Zealand, like the south side, and dropped everybody off. And by January 14th, the ship had reached the Antarctic Circle. Mill quotes, "On 23rd January, the Great Ice Barrier was sighted in longitude 172 degrees west. It had never been before in such a short period of time by any expedition." And according to Britannica, again, when the Nimrod was prevented from reaching the base camp Edward VII Peninsula due to ice, two sled teams, one by Shackleton, they left the ship and they made the trek to the base where they were supposed to be at. The party were within 111 statute miles when the approach and exhaustion of the food supply compelled them to turn back. And according to historian Bo Riffenberg in his book, Shackleton's Forgotten Voyage, The Journey of the Nimrod, a very interesting thing gets brought up, the fact that before turning back, they were actually the first people in history to make a complete and successful ascent of the volcano Mount Erebus, which is the southernmost active volcano on the planet. And Britannica explains that the sledding party returned to the base camp in late February and realized that the ship had left them. After the ice melted, the ship had left and they were stranded. So they set fire to their base camp and waited, and finally, in late February, they successfully retrieved by the boat because someone had gotten their signal. Due to Shackleton's heroic efforts in advancing geographical studies on this trip, he received the Cullum Geographical Medal, like I stated earlier, and he was knighted on December 14th, 1909 by King Edward VII. "5 years of popularity from the Nimrod expedition came to an end when Ernest Shackleton set off on arguably the most popular expedition of his career. Encyclopedia Britannica talks about how, with the intention of crossing Antarctica through the Weddell Sea and the South Pole, his ship, the Endurance, set sail in August of 1914. Fergus Fleming, an historian, in his book South, the Endurance Expedition, he talks about how, while leaving South Georgia on December 5th, his goal is to reach the South Pole through the Weddell Sea. Whalers told him to wait until February due to the ice, but Shackleton did not listen. So on December 7th, 1914, the ship was only 3 miles east and 5 miles north of their charted spot, when slowly they saw more icebergs, and pretty soon they were packed in ice and they could not move. Eric Mills, a naval historian, in one of his articles titled "This Expedition to Search for Shackleton's Lost Ship," he talks about the journey being one of survival and endurance. Because the ship was trapped in the ice off the Kerry coast and drifted for 10 months before being crushed. So the crew, according to Mills again, they abandoned the ship, and for 497 days and 346 miles, they trekked across the barren white terrain. He quotes that they camped on ice floes, suffered frostbite, staved off starvation by eating their dogs, and we finally made it to lifeboats to get successfully to Elephant Island. Lives were lost, and for Shackleton, the remaining other 5 was a 720 nautical mile voyage across South Georgia to get to the whaling camps where they were going to ask for help. To top it off, there was a giant mountain range in the middle of it, so they made that trek across the mountain range, and finally, on May 20th, 1916, they made it to the Stromness whaling camps and got help. Even though Shackleton survived the Endurance Expedition, he unfortunately died during his final mission, the Shackleton Route Antarctic Expedition, and on January 5th, 1922, he suffered a heart attack while in Grytviken, South Georgia, and died at the age of 47. I just want to point out, this is interesting, that's actually his tombstone, and his wife had asked for him to be buried in Grytviken, South Georgia. So if you were to go there today, you could actually see his tombstone, which is kind of cool in my opinion. As I stated in my speech, I have explained many instances when Ernest Shackleton explored Antarctica and fought for his life in terrible conditions. All of you will probably hold some sort of leadership position one day, but for some, that position could cost you your life. Thank you.